Hello, everybody. It's Saturday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. I'm Chris Weuve, and this is Starfleet Tactical. And tonight, I have with me my friend Peter Gold, a practicing merchant mariner who is currently ashore because people who go to sea occasionally like to come ashore because that's where their stuff is. That's where their house is. But in any event, tonight we're going to talk. This is so. First of all, this is a question and answer show. So if you got any questions, be sure and put them in. Especially if you got any questions about the infrastructure stuff. We're going to go back and talk about the infrastructure stuff from last week. In fact, if anything, I probably should have had those slides loaded, and I did not. We probably should have walked through them, but we're not going to do that. Yeah. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the reason why he's in town, and just sort of do a general discussion about various things. We've been talking about the effect of prolong in the Honor Harrington universe and what it does to your force structure when people never retire, and what the implications of that are, and how that would play out in that universe and how it might play out in others. And we've also been talking about the prime directive and all sorts of things. And so Delon asks if he's ashore. Is he currently practicing? Yes, in the same way that doctors go home at the end of the day, and they may not actually be doing medicine right when you see them, like in the restaurant, but they are still doctors. They are still practicing. And practice does indeed make perfect, as Randall says. So in any event, let's. So first of all, we're going to do the traditional admin slide. I'm going to tell you about the next couple of shows, because I can actually tell you pretty much what the next 3 shows are going to be. And 2 of them, he's probably going to be on the show because it involves stuff that we're going to do together. But before that, so what have you been up to since the last time you were on the show?
I was at sea. I was out in the Far East, I think.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. I was on a ship based out of the Far East. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Can you say what ship?
Probably not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he works for a company that has contracts with the United States government.
Yes, that's about as far as
you can probably infer that the Navy might be involved because, ships. And so some of the ships that he's been involved with over the years are ships that I've also been involved with, in that while doing naval exercises, they were players in those exercises. But in previous shows, Peter has taken us on tours for varying values of us. There's at least 2 ships that you did tours with. One I did with Tom, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
One did I do one by myself? No, there was somebody else involved.
You did 3. I think you did 3. You've done 3. You did the Wheat twice. Sorry, you did the Martin twice, and you did the Wright with Sean.
Yeah, with Sean. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when he gets a job in Norfolk, when he gets a job in the Far East, I don't go and visit his ship. When he gets a job in Norfolk, I go down and visit his ship. And I've gotten to see a whole bunch of different ships. Like the last one that I saw down in Norfolk was an aviation support ship. So when the Marines would deploy someplace that didn't have a place where they could set up aviation repair facilities, they'd bring the ship along, and basically it would be a fully functioning garage for airplanes and helicopters mostly, right?
Yeah, it's helicopters. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps in theory they could have repaired an AV-8 Harrier, but probably not, because you really kind of have to have the techs involved, and that's a surprisingly large airplane.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with them. I know we did a lot of helo work.
So they do a lot of helo work. So your helo needs to have the spark plugs changed. You fly it out there, and they change the spark plugs and stuff like that, and they bring it back. There are no spark plugs in helos, to the best of my knowledge.
No.
And so the ship before that was a standard ro-ro ship, a roll-on, roll-off ship.
Yes.
In which the Navy and the Army have had pre-positioning ships that are stock full of things that like an armored division might need if it goes to war in various places. And the Martin was a ship that had spent a bunch of time in Diego Garcia, if I remember correctly.
As far as I know, yes.
Just sitting there with a bunch of tanks and armor involved in case the Marines decided they needed to go kick ass. Somebody decided that the Marines needed to go kick ass someplace. They could send the ship there, or the Army, whoever it was. And then they could unload it. And then during the time period that you were on board, they were actually just basically in a hot spare in Norfolk, right?
That was what we were supposed to be, but we had a lot of issues that were preventing us from getting underway.
Yes. So
lack of money for years, lack of maintenance, and its budgetary process, NAVC issues.
And maybe the people that were previously in charge wrote it hard and put it away wet. I think there was a little bit of that.
Yes.
From what you were saying.
Yeah.
So not to name any names, but basically it's like your car, right? If you don't do any maintenance on your car, it will eventually catch up with you. And so when you don't do maintenance on your ships, it eventually catches up with you. And ships aren't nearly as dramatic as airplanes. When you don't do it on airplanes, they fall out of the sky. But it's dramatic enough. And so, as the chief engineer on the Martin, he got to be the guy who had to do all that stuff, figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
So
a lot of paperwork, trying to get approval for contractors, budgeting a couple of years out, trying to figure out who's going to, what's important that what can we get approved? How
to dispose of the hazmat.
Yes.
So there's episodes on both of those ship tours. To be honest, I have absolutely no idea how far back they were, a couple of years at least. But we did ship tours on that. And a lot of that stuff is very interesting because, we send ships to sea for, 6 months. If it's a long deployment, it might be 8 months-ish.
Yeah.
But in some science fiction worlds, that's enough to go to the other side of the galaxy and back. In other science fiction universes, that doesn't get you halfway to your destination. And so it's interesting sort of looking at these ships and trying to imagine what the implications of all that is. And the Ro-Ros, they pull up to a port, they got a big stern ramp, they drop the stern ramp onto the pier, and they just roll them off. Okay, what if you're in orbit and you've got this big ship you can't land, then you need to have something to get them down to the planet. For a Ro-Ros don't deploy things like air cushion vehicles or things like that, right? They have to have a port.
That's what the expeditionary sea bases, the Montford Point and such, are for. We can offload to them in a barge, and then the barge brings it actually ashore. So you need to. There's another piece of the puzzle there, and it is, to my great regret, a friend of mine was the master of one of those types of ships. No, he wasn't the captain, because they had a very old school, and by old school I mean 1700s, early 1700s approach to it, where you had a civilian captain, civilian master. I'm sorry, you're right. Master and commander. He was not the master, he was the commander. Thank you. You had a civilian master who was responsible for the safe operation of the ship, and then you had a Navy 06 who was responsible for the mission. And so he would tell the master, I need you to go X. I need you to do X. And then he would do it. And that guy, by the way, is Tom Mays, who's now retired from the United States Navy. And I hope that means he is working on the sequel to his book, A Sword into Darkness. And it is my intent to have Tom on the show at some point, because it's a fantastic book. It really, really is good. And he told me last time I saw him, I had dinner with him in San Diego a couple of years ago. And he told me that he had written the sequel. The problem was the sequel had way too many points of view characters.
And he said the sequel was just difficult to follow because there were too many characters and he needed to figure out how to split it up and simplify it. This is the sort of problem that writers run into all the time, is how do you keep the character count down? I made the comment to, do you know John Henry? Have you met John?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so he writes under the name Jack Campbell, Lost Fleet series, great series. Want to have him on the show too. He's an Annapolis grad. He retired as a commander in the Navy, surface warfare officer. And at one point, for his main character, Blackjack Gary, I said, John, there's a problem. There's a problem with this book. Blackjack doesn't have a staff. He's a fleet commander at this point. He sort of fell into the job, but nonetheless, he's a fleet commander and there's roles that need to take place. And so he doesn't have a staff. And, he'd have to have a staff, even if it was people that were dual-hatted as a second job. You are the intel officer, as a second job, you are the ops officer, et cetera, et cetera. You are the coordinator for XYZ, because you need to make sure, for instance, that not everybody's doing maintenance on their radar at the same time. If everybody's doing maintenance on their radar at the same time, you're not seeing anything, right? But you got to do maintenance on your radar. So every now and then you have to bring your radar down. And so it's important that there be somebody that coordinates when you bring the radar down. So I said, John, where's Blackjack's staff? And he said, do you know how many point of view characters I already have? I have, just how many characters I have. I have way too many characters as is. I was looking for excuses to shed characters, not to create new ones. And I said, Roger that. So that's the difference between the real world and science fiction. And that it's the functional equivalent of watching a medical show and the anesthesiologist in the audience says, yeah, but that guy wouldn't have said that. This other person would have said it. And the response is, yeah, but if we have him say it, then that's a speaking role and we have to pay him more. So we're going to have that guy saying who we're already paying to say stuff. Yeah. That stuff happens all the time.
Yeah, at least if you're doing a movie, you can have all these people in the background as, they don't actually say anything. They just they just move around. And, oh yeah, he's got a staff. What do they do? Well, we don't have to say. If you know what the Navy does, if a Navy staff is, you know what they're doing.
Yeah. So Bob said he was having trouble getting back in. I'm curious as to whether anybody else was having trouble getting in. Following the link. If there was something going on, just say something in the chat. There's nothing I can do about it, but I am a little bit curious as to whether there's potentially a problem there. So, okay, so I tell you what, let's go ahead and take a look at the admin slide. And so it's actually a couple of slides here. So there's a standard intro. Right. So here's the agenda for this little ad. I'm going to do the admin slide. I'm going to show you my topic capture slide, which is the things I kind of have in the batter's box, a little bit extended from the admin slide. Haven't shown that in a while. I'm going to give you a preview of the next couple of shows, and then Peter and I will talk some more. And if you've got any questions, be sure and let us know, and we'll talk about that infrastructure stuff from last week. Yeah. Too. So, okay, so here's the admin slide. The big takeaway is no show next week because I'll be in Norfolk. He lives in Norfolk, well, Virginia Beach, right next door. He'll be in Maine, yeah. But I'll be in Norfolk, meeting with my good friend Brian Haven and some other people down there. Then the following week after that, the 30th of May, I will be at Wonderfest with Wright Sublette and maybe others. And so no show then. On the 6th of June, I'm expecting that there will be a show. Expecting. Possibly not, depending. And then after that, reply hazy, ask again later. Because basically what it boils down to, I'm going to have some surgery. Nothing life-threatening, but I will be hard down for at least a week. I am declaring that I'm going to be hard down for 2 weeks because I don't want to try to overextend myself, and because if I feel up for it, it'll give me the opportunity to work ahead. If I don't feel up for it, then I haven't made any promises that I can't deliver on. And so I should find out on Tuesday what my schedule will look like, when I'm going to have surgery, and hence when all the other things sort of stack up after that. And then I've got the standard in the queue stuff, but everything there is on the next slide. So I'll go ahead and flip over to the next slide, which is the more extended version of that slide, which is basically, these are all the topics that I've kind of got in my hopper that I'm seriously thinking about doing. A lot of them involve some work. Like, for instance, 2300 and Jovian Chronicles is going to involve a bunch of reading. Traveler Navies, oh my God, that's going to involve a bunch of reading. The Space 1999 and UFO ones involves at least reading the new tech manuals that came out from Anderson Productions, and they look pretty cool, but I need to do some more, read those and do some more research. I need to read this handbook for space pioneers and talk about it, and the guide to the Orville. So those are all things that involve reading. And then I've got a bunch of other topics. Like, I want to do an extended history, hiding, and hydrodynamics. You've seen versions of that in previous presentations I've done, but I want to do the full up, like, hour-long version of that presentation. I've never done it that way, and I need to. And, there's a bunch of stuff down at the bottom. We get to replicators and post-scarcity economics. Those are things where I did the sort of the first part of a 2 or 3 part thing and haven't done the second. So I want to go back and do that. Andy Presby wants to come on and do his Starfleet, the revamped version of his Starfleet power systems talk, but that he's still working on it. And I want to update my aircraft carriers and space talk. That's actually going to be multiple episodes to do the sort of the current definitive version of that. And then at some point, there's a bunch of stuff there. If you want, you can stop and freeze frame it and take a look at it. The one thing I will call out is, I think the Exordium 3, so Exordium has now been reissued as a 3rd edition. I had on my list of things to do today, but I did not get it done before Peter showed up, to send Dave Trowbridge and Sherwood Smith an email and say, hey, tell me what the differences are from the 2nd edition. Because I don't know if the differences are we fixed some typos or we rewrote it. It's described as changes and corrections, but I don't know what that means. And between the 1st and the 2nd edition, they added a lot. They probably added, over the course of the 5-book series, they probably added 100 to 150 pages. And so the question is, I'm just sort of curious as to how big a lift it is. But in any event, it is my favorite series of all time. And I think it would be a good read along. And so if you all want to read along with me, that's great. If not, I'll read it. I'll do a summary of each book. And I want to talk about combat in that universe, because combat in that universe is very interesting. Because it's a universe where the sensors all run at the speed of light, but some of the weapons are faster than light. And it's got a tactically useful FTL drive. So you're constantly in a situation where you're jumping around and you're trying to build your sensor picture. And you're having to be methodical about thinking about how you build a sensor picture. So it's very interesting. Okay, so preview of a couple of things that are going to be the next few shows. The first is Peter and I are going to talk about the NS Savannah, which... So NS is not a normal prefix that you see before ships. I suspect it might be special. Yep. Peter, what does NS stand for?
Nuclear.
Nuclear Ship Savannah. So there have been a handful of civilian nuclear vessels created. The Russians are very fond of nuclear icebreakers, so they've done a bunch of those. But other than those, in terms of like cargo and passenger ships, there has been, if I remember correctly, a Russian nuclear freighter, a German nuclear freighter, a Japanese nuclear freighter, and the NS Savannah, which was a mixed passenger freight ship.
Yes.
And it wasn't really intended to be a working ship. It was intended to be sort of a demonstration project. It has like a very large galley because the expectation was it was going to go all these different places and have lots of VIP banquets and stuff like that as it did port calls. They also did things like the cranes that you see up the front. They were picked more for their sleek and futuristic appearance than their ability to lift cargo out of the cargo hold. So they're a little underrated for what they're supposed to do. And this ship does not have a working nuclear reactor anymore, and it is currently sitting in Baltimore Harbor, which is about an hour away from here. And coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, where Peter and I will be tomorrow.
Yeah. National Maritime Day, they're having an open house. So if you're in the Baltimore area, you can go onto the NS Savannah page. I look for NS Savannah, and you should find something. It's not the MARAD page; it's its own little support group.
Yeah,
and you can RSVP to show up.
Put Baltimore in your search term, and you'll find it.
Yeah.
And so we're going to go take a look at that. And in all honesty, I'm probably not going to take that very many photos on that one, because if you go online, and it's worth doing, there's a metric shit ton of photos online about this ship, including some virtual tour ones where you can go in and spin around and take a look at the entire area. So I'm going to download a bunch of photos to put in the presentation I'm doing, but I'm not expecting that I will take a whole lot of photos on this particular trip. But it will be interesting to go and take a look at it. It's a beautiful ship. I was telling Peter, I think it would make a great story of some rich, multi-billionaire, maybe close to trillionaire, decides that this would make a great yacht for him, and so he takes it and recommissions it. I think that would be a fantastic story, totally and completely impractical, but it would be cool to do.
Yeah.
But it was so we're going to discuss the purpose of the ship, the history of that ship, the design and a lot of the design issues with regard to it. And then okay, so let's run it through the science fiction converter. How would this work in a science fiction setting? And because I can, if nothing else, the passenger cargo ship, there's only that is something that you used to see a lot.
Yes.
You don't see it much anymore, although you pointed me at,
there's a YouTube reel by a couple that travels the world. They just recently settled down, and they were in the South Pacific someplace, and they got on a passenger cargo vessel. The ship calls into a bunch of different relatively small islands, drops off some break bulk cargo, some containers, and the passengers get a day in port.
And we're talking 100 passengers ish. We're not talking, there's no water slide on that ship.
Yeah.
There's
a swimming pool.
It's not a carnival, but it's not a carnival cruise. It's sort of like the sort of thing, it's much closer to the sort of thing that you'd see in Traveler.
Yeah.
Or maybe early Star Trek.
Maybe.
Early Federation.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time Picard, it's all the ships are huge and they're fast, and I have a fond spot in my heart that's growing over time for stuff like in the era of the Archer to pre-Constitution era, the Archer to Pike era. I think that would be very, very interesting. That I find that interesting. So, but that's one of the things we're going to talk about. And then one of the ships that we're going to do, one of the other ships we're going to do is the SS John W. Brown. SS in this case, oops, hold on a second, I accidentally hit something. SS in this case stands for steamship.
Yes.
This is a World War II Liberty ship. And unlike a lot of World War II Liberty ships, it's a World War II Liberty ship. And what I mean by that is we have a tendency to use Liberty ship in the same way that we use Kleenex. A lot of things that are described as Liberty ships weren't technically Liberty ships, because Liberty ships were technically a class of ships, and they were followed by Victory ships, and they were all cargo ships, and there was an equivalent set of tankers and other types of ships. There was an entire grouping of designs that had a lot of similarities involved, but they were actually technically distinct ship classes.
Yeah. What later became MARAD, the government basically came up with a whole bunch of designs for merchant ships, subsidized them, and during the war they just built them. But they still came up with standard MARAD later on, actually designed ships and let people build them wherever. But these were finished designs. MARAD's gotten away from that. They haven't designed a ship for commercial use in 50 years probably.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah.
But Liberty ships are an absolutely fascinating thing, and a lot of it's fascinating because of the design trade-offs. Like, for instance, they were triple expansion steam engines, and the reason why they were triple expansion steam is that was a well-developed technology that a lot of people knew how to build. In a perfect world, you might want to be using steam turbines because you could go faster and you could better avoid U-boats, et cetera, et cetera. But the conclusion was that every steam turbine was going to be needed for a warship. And steam turbines were very, very hard to make, very precise manufacturing to get those right.
Yeah, the bigger problem was actually the reduction gears. There was only one plant that was making them in the U.S.
I stand corrected. See, that's why he's on the show, is because he's actually, studied the history of this like in school.
Yeah, there was one plant in Salem, Mass.
Okay. Yeah, and that sounds correct, that it was more of a reduction gear thing, and with triple expansion steam, it's just a direct drive, right?
Correct.
And so the end result was they weren't particularly fast as these things go, but they could crank them out like sausages. John W. Brown took 54 days to build. It went from an empty slipway to being in the water in 54 days, and then they still had to do all the fitting out stuff. That day, they launched 3 ships. It was the third of 3 ships launched that day.
For that shipyard.
For that shipyard. Because they're cranking them out like sausages. And so there's some implications there for your science fiction Navy and your science fiction convoys and all the rest of that. How expensive do you want your transports to be? What do you do in the case of a war? How much transports are you going to need? Like, do we think that the Federation needs huge convoys?
They don't seem to have shown it.
I mean, I'm sure that they have to. There's certain things they're going to have to move around. Antimatter is the one that comes to mind. We have certainly evidence from various sources that things like warp cores are made in a fashion that sounds the coils. I said cores. I meant coils. Warp coils are made in a fashion that looks a lot more like a forging technique than it is just running it through a transporter. That sort of assembling technique, a replicator. But you still kind of wonder about how much do they need?
Yeah.
So it may very well be that all they need is sufficient feedstock to run the replicators, and that's all local, and you don't really need to move huge amounts of stuff during wartime.
Yeah. The ship was designed that if it made one trip, it was considered paid for.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that.
Yeah. So,
and then the last thing on the list is that I'm going to go to Wonderfest at the end of the month. And these are people that I know have been there in the past. I know that Wright's going to be there, so I don't think Wright's on tonight, but I'm going to spend some time hanging with Wright, which is a good thing. And then John Eaves has gone in the past. John's done some fantastic design work. Rick Sternbach has gone in the past. He's done some fantastic design work. Bill Krause has gone, and so you can see this model from Bill Krause below. In fact, I think I've said in the past that John Eaves is, that if you looked in Picard's ready room and on the wall, if there was a model there, it was probably made by John Eaves. I think I got John Eaves and Bill Krause mixed up. I think Bill Krause is more of the model maker and John Eaves is more of the art director, designer type. So it's Bill Krause, I think, who was making all those models. So my apologies for getting that wrong. That ship that you see there down below is the Sentinel class. And that's actually probably a ship that at some point I'm going to do a deep dive on. It is a light cruiser from the original series era, totally non-canon, obviously, but it's a nifty little design, and it's relatively small as these things go, and there's some great artwork associated with it. So I want to do something with that. And that's it for the presentation portion. So let me kill that. Okay, so let's go back and talk a little bit about infrastructure. So you pointed out to me that map that I put up of Naval Station Norfolk,
it's got to be really old,
was really, really old. And so I suspected as much at the time because it was on a page where somebody was talking about how Naval Station Norfolk had changed over time, and that when they went there in like the 1960s, it had a totally different layout than it did today. But he's confirmed that it's really, really old. So why did I use that one rather than just find a more modern one? Well, first of all, it didn't need a modern one to illustrate the concept I was saying.
Yeah.
And the other thing is it was labeled. That's one of the things that I wanted to talk about, was the fact that there was a whole bunch of stuff that's there in close proximity and support functions, and there's the air station right there and everything else like that. And so the more important thing was that it was labeled, and I didn't have to try to puzzle all that stuff out.
Yeah.
So anything else that I need to say? He spent a lot more time in ports than I have, and he especially spent a lot more time in Norfolk than I have.
Yeah. Okay. Infrastructure-wise, it's more of a Norfolk term. It's called downriver contractors.
Okay.
And that is all the people who have a facility in town.
I'm going to write shit down. That's an expert's telling me about.
Yeah.
No, I should have a pen over here. Yeah, that's what I'm looking
for. Yeah. And they come on, they bring a bunch of people. They mostly bring hand tools, they still might need a crane lift to get them on board, but we're not talking anything super huge usually. Super huge stuff usually comes with a specialty contractor if it's not in a shipyard. But they provide an awful lot of contracting repair support. One of the guys I was working on our ship, dealing with our hazmat when we were decommissioning, his company gets a contract regularly to wax the decks on Navy ships. So he was very happy we were getting rid of two double stacked pallets of floor wax.
Because he's got a fixed price contract.
Yeah.
And all the materials are coming out of his contract. So if he gets the materials for low cost or free, he doesn't have to pay for the.
Yep.
That's probably how that works.
Probably. He did not charge us for disposal of that.
Good for him.
Because that would have been double dipping.
Good for him.
But yeah, so and they took a bunch of other stuff that probably wasn't on the the initial paid part of the contract, but still.
So why are they called downriver contractors?
I don't know where the term originated. Probably because in some ways you'd think it would be upriver.
Yeah, because I mean you're at the mouth of the river. You can't get much more downriver.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's just the term. It's all the little, and this is true for almost any kind of industrial process, that you don't necessarily have just one big contract, big place. You have this whole web of companies supporting it. So a lot of it is going to end up with supply chain issues.
Who lets that contract?
Well, if it's government contract, it's either going to be like Military Seal of Command, MARAD, or the U.S. Navy itself.
Okay, but I mean, so the U.S. at some point, somebody in the U.S. Navy says, "I need to get the deck waxed."
Yes, so that would come. Somebody on the ship approves it, their budget, their M&R budget,
and they send a note ashore.
Presumably, I don't know enough about the contracting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
My guess is it's probably, we got X number of ships. Each one of them needs to have it done once a year, so that we're going to let a contract for you to do.
Yeah.
For you to do 50 ships, right?
Yeah.
And so, USS Millard Fillmore comes in the port and says, "Hey, we need our deck waxed," and they send the note ashore and they say, "We'll send the deck waxers out."
Yep, probably something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that's happened over the decades, the Navy has outsourced a lot of repair work. So they're bringing contractors in to do a lot of work, especially preservation. The idea that your very junior enlisted people would be out on deck chipping and painting all day, not so much anymore. Part of it is that the coatings, it's coatings, not paint. It's a very technical material. If you mix it wrong,
you have to mix it, you have to cure it, you have to, apply chemicals to cure the thing.
Yeah.
If
you don't do it right, you start over. You have to rip it all off.
The skin of a Navy ship is not quite the same as the skin of, say, an F-35, but it's getting in that direction. So.
Yeah. And then the downriver folks also do, if you've got a ship that has a minor breakdown, or something that doesn't require a dry dock, just needs a lay berth, you'd call it a downriver contractor.
Lay berth.
Okay, so you come into a commercial port, the commercial side, so not the Navy side.
Okay.
If there even is the Navy there.
Right.
And it could be a pier that has a warehouse that's not used. It could be a pier that is only used every 3 months. Like there's one ship.
So it's just an open pier that isn't gonna that I can just go lay up at.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's sounds like it's the functional equivalent of going to the auto parts store and they say, "Hey, look, it's okay for you to work on your car, but you have to do it over there."
Yeah.
I don't want you doing it right in front of the door. You got to do it over there in that other part of the parking lot. Okay.
Yes.
That's interesting. I'm trying to, as I'm thinking through the science fiction implications of this, right? Because everything you should think through the science fiction implications of it, right? That's why we're all here, right?
Yeah. So solar clipper size, say?
Yeah. Okay.
Nathan
Lowell, Solar Clipper series.
Yeah. You may be in the, you may be sitting off of the station. You may not be connected. You're not actually tied up to the station. You bring a bunch of stuff on board, and then you pull away from the station, I don't know, a few kilometers or however long, and you've got the workmen on board, and then they do the work, and then you pull back in and let them go. Or it's certain parts of the station where the ship just is, it's not really set up very well for cargo handling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's sort of like in the very end of everything. So it's kind of a dead spot.
Okay.
And that's where it's cheaper, fewer services, but that's where you can get repair work done.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I should highlight something that I said last week when talking about infrastructure, and because a harbor is basically an area in which you can build ports, and harbors frequently, sort of historically, it was more about it being a sheltered area than it was whether there was infrastructure there. Like a harbor can be totally and completely undeveloped.
Yeah.
And
so this is where you can have a port without having a port.
Yes.
Yeah. Or you can't have a port without a port. I think is what Bucko was saying. Dean Mayhew, my professor at the academy, we spent a 45-minute lecture on infrastructure. So it's been a long time, but for a port to actually be active,
really old.
Yeah.
As am I.
Yeah. So you had to have a hinterland to collect stuff into the port and send stuff out. Otherwise, it's like if there's nothing there, you go up to, say, rural Maine. Nice deep water. You can put a pier in there, really nice. You can fit a big ship in there.
Why?
But why? Yeah, there's nothing there. There's nothing there.
Yeah, and you made an observation, I think, on our way to dinner tonight about how containerization, a lot of the old ports that were sort of classic U.S. ports went away because when containerization came in, and now you're dealing with much larger container ships and you're dealing with much greater volumes of things coming in, there just wasn't any place to expand to.
Right.
And I talked about that specifically with regard to New York City, but he reminded me, it's like, it wasn't just New York City that had this issue, right? Yeah. It's not just New York City that had Elizabethtown created right next to it that sort of sucked all the oxygen out from the port of New York. But that happened all over.
Yeah. So like Boston used to be a really big port, but so was Portland, Maine. And
it's in the name.
Yeah. Yeah. But containerization and the interstate system basically almost killed it. You've got small tankers bringing bulk liquids in, mostly home heating oil.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a refinery in Boston. I'm not sure if it's still there. I remember going down there as a kid. The tankers were coming in. I think. But the ships were smaller. And the container ships, to get more efficiency out of them, they're bigger and bigger, more containers, because it doesn't take anywhere near as much time to offload a container ship compared, as it gets bigger.
Yeah.
2 minutes per container or less.
And that's a function of that's something that the port provides, not something that the ship provides.
Yeah. And
so, like, how many crew do you need to operate a ship that has 10,000 containers?
13 to 20.
How many crew do you need to operate a ship that has 100 containers? 13 to 20?
No. 10 to 15.
Yeah. So
yeah. But a Liberty ship is 50.
2 orders of magnitude decrease in the number of containers, and the number of crew goes down by maybe a third.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Part of that's changed with hours of rest requirements.
Yeah.
That you actually can't have just two deck officers and they just alternate. You now have to have more deck officers, or you're going to tie your ship up, because you're only legally allowed to work so many hours a day. You have to have actually unbroken, not on duty hours every day.
How many?
10 out of 24.
You could do that with port and starboard. Barely.
Yeah, barely. But there actually, I think there has to be a
port and starboard watches when you're got two guys and you're alternating. That's what that's called.
Yeah. But when you start doing cargo all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So
you find yourself in a situation where we can't leave port because everybody has to go rack out for a while.
Yeah.
To get back in sequence. Yeah, that wouldn't be good.
Yeah. And then barges also took over. It was easier they're really trying to push it, but it hasn't gotten anywhere near as far as MARAD would like. What they're calling the Marine Highway. The idea is that you'd offload stuff in, say, Port Elizabeth, New Jersey, put the containers on a barge and tow it through the East River up Long Island Sound to various places in New England. Because the really big container ships don't want to pull into Boston. They don't want to pull into Newport, Rhode Island, places like that, because just not worth it. Just the
Isn't that why we have trains, so that you can unload in Port Elizabeth and just move everything around by train, and why we have trucks?
Trains, yes, and that's why we have the best freight railroad in the world of what they call Class A trains. Not my specific expertise, but that's why we also don't have passenger trains.
Yeah,
except for the Northeast Corridor, really, in terms of commercially viable. But trucks, they're trying to get them off. They're trying to get them off 95 between Washington and Boston.
Yeah, as somebody who's done that drive a lot, I'm all in favor of there being no trucks on 95 between Boston and Washington.
Yeah, because they get them to come off in New Jersey and they drive them all the way down to DC or something.
Yeah.
So because nobody wants to come up, they do come into Baltimore. We saw that with the Dolly, of course.
Yeah.
They do.
That's the ship that hit the bridge.
Yeah. But
is that bridge been repaired?
Not yet.
Okay.
No,
so
there was it's in the news now that the contractor has been fired. I haven't been following the details on that.
Is that going to affect our trip tomorrow?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
I don't have a good enough feel for how Baltimore is laid out, despite the fact that I've spent the majority of my adult life living within an hour and a half of Baltimore.
Yeah.
I don't have a good feel for what is located where in the harbor there. So let's see if there's any questions here.
Yeah.
So Patrick Ross points out that at one point leading up to World War II, the Royal Navy designed and built trawlers. Olive says, let's see, a lot of times navies might subsidize ships for other enterprises if they could be used in the event of war. Yeah, in fact, we were talking about that specifically with regard to the Honorverse. We couldn't specifically remember how much the Manticorans were subsidizing the merchant marine, the merchant navy. And how they were doing it. So in the real world, there's a couple of different ways that subsidies have happened, at least in terms of how we've done it, and presumably others. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so the United States, starting with the either 1920 or 1936 acts, up through roughly 1980, we had two things called construction differential and operational differential subsidies. Construction differential would pay 90% of the cost for American-made materials for ship.
Okay.
So we kept steamships a lot longer than any other country because we didn't have any large diesel designs that were American.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
So then Mara would guarantee bonds for the purchase of the ship.
okay.
My father used to invest those. He was in control of it. He was in control of a pension fund. It was one of his other hats.
Okay.
And he constantly bought Marriott bonds, 100% guaranteed by the U.S. government. If the ship sinks, damaged, company goes bankrupt, whatever, 100% guarantee from the government on the bonds. Most people didn't want to deal with them because, oh my God, what happens if the ship sinks? You know,
read the fine print.
Yes. So you got there was the subsidy there. Germany, they had a tax break for construction. So apparently it was dentists in Germany that were investing in all the ships made in Germany in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s as a tax write-off for them.
Dentists.
You know,
Germans.
Yeah. You know, it just, you know, some group of high earners gets, you know, somebody comes up and tells their professional association, hey, this is really safe. This is really this, and this. And, you know, they come to the, you know, professional association meeting to give a economics presentation on how to save taxes as a whatever.
I love it.
Yeah. So,
so I'm 3/4 German. So when I say Germans, you know,
yeah.
Like my grandmother used to make this really weird potato salad.
Yeah.
That Germans would understand. So, okay. So that sounds to me from what you described, that was just a general, having a strong merchant marine is a good thing for us. So we're going to support that.
Yes.
Was there any obligation? Was the Navy involved in this at all? Was there any obligation there? Like, was there any requirement that said, hey, if you get this, we want it to be a 25 knot ship and not a 20 knot ship? It had requirements like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Quote, military useful.
Okay. Okay. So there's a list of things where it's like you need to be able to check all these boxes in order to qualify.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And note, none of those boxes are things that are useful if you're just a civilian ship, right? If you build an engine that's capable of 25 knots, you buy an engine capable of 25 knots versus 20 knots, it's going to be bigger, it's going to use more fuel, it's going to be more expensive, and you're probably not going to use it at 25 knots, you're going to use it at 20 knots, and so you bought a lot of excess capacity that you don't necessarily need. So you know, it's in the country's best interest to subsidize things like that so that you got it when you need it.
Yeah. So one of the things before World War II, they subsidized and built a whole bunch of high-speed twin-screw tankers.
Specifically so they could keep up with the fleet if they needed to keep up with the fleet.
Yep.
Yeah.
2 days after Pearl Harbor, they are all taken out of commercial service and turned over to the Navy.
And I believe
Sal
Micagliano
has a number of episodes on YouTube about it.
Yeah, there's a book called. All right, I'm gonna look this up. So talk about the operational thing while I'm looking this up.
So the operational differential subsidy was American wages, American regulatory requirements, and such were much higher than a lot of third world countries. So we could compete against the UK on wages, sort of, but pretty close. But if you're getting people out of, at the time, the Philippines, India at the time, where, you know, mostly for unlicensed, you didn't have to pay them very much. So American ships got what, like I said, operational differential, whatever the difference is between what the union negotiated wages were and what a comparable third world billet would be.
All right. I'm putting a link in for a book called Gray Steel and Black Oil, Fuel Tankers and Replenishment at Sea in the U.S. Navy, 1912 to 1995.
Yeah.
That when he's got a picture of the cover of the book that I read, but apparently that book is now available online. Unfortunately, not as a PDF, but as a website that you can go to. And so, but it's an interesting book.
Yeah.
And it talks about the twin screw freighters and twin screw tankers and all the rest of that stuff. Yeah. So I'm thinking back to, running through science fiction backgrounds in my head. I seem to recall there's something similar to this in Traveler where there is subsidized stuff like that.
Yeah. So that's the mail.
I think
that was where they subsidized to carry mail. Or they'd subsidize based on the route.
Yeah, and
I'd have to look at the rules on Traveler.
Yeah, the wonderful thing about Traveler is there's so much of it. The sort of pain in the ass thing about Traveler is that there's so much of it, and so it's sometimes hard to remember exactly what was where, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So also with regard to Traveler, or also with regard to other science fiction things, I don't recall. Was there anything? Have we seen anything in Star Trek that talks about subsidized merchants or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of. You don't see a lot of stuff about merchants at all. So
yeah, if we did, it was probably an Enterprise. Oh, going back to Traveler, there actually is a ship called the Subsidized Merchant.
Yeah,
it's a type of ship. It's I believe a 400-ton or 500-ton ship that you as a player character could have, and it's specifically designed. I believe, if I remember correctly, the idea is that they wanted to ensure that a lot of planets would have access to trade ships, and so they subsidize them to actually go and do stuff. They're still responsible for making a profit, but they, there's some program like this that makes it happen.
Yeah. Because especially back before airplanes were ubiquitous, you'd have places that would just never get cargo, never see anybody from the outside world on a regular basis because it just wasn't worthwhile diverting a ship there.
Yeah.
Especially pre-container when you have to unload and unload everything by hand. A small amount of cargo, if it wasn't loaded specifically correctly in terms of how easy it is to get to, if you have to offload a whole bunch of stuff to get to it, it takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's just not worth it. There are places like that still are like that. Easter Island.
Yeah.
I don't know how often ships go to Easter Island, but I suspect that it fits in the category of if you want a new refrigerator in 2027, you should have ordered it by now.
Yeah.
Hawaiian Islands aren't quite as bad as that, but because they've got a lot of people there, and they're on the route, but they not as much as they used to be. It's
they've never really been on the route, except to go to Hawaii.
It used to be that you had to go to Hawaii because you couldn't do a transpac.
Yeah.
You had to stop along the way for water, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Fuel would be nice too, in days of fuel. And I want to say there was a Brian Keith movie about them raising cattle in Hawaii because they knew there'd be all these sailing ships coming in, and they'd want fresh meat, and so they raised cattle in Hawaii. But I know that I knew somebody who went to Easter Island.
Okay.
And you fly, and it's like 1,000 miles from the nearest I guess it's Peru, I think, that you fly out of to get to Easter Island. And your trip will be, if you go to Easter Island, your trip, the shortest trip you can do is like a half hour on the island. The next shortest trip you can do is 1 week and a half hour, because that airplane only comes once a week.
Yeah.
And that's an airplane.
There's a couple of islands. There's a couple of places in the Western Isles of Scotland that are like that. They have boat service, but it's once a day.
Yeah.
Or some of it's plane service, but either way, it's once a day.
Falklands are like that. The nearest place that you could fly to from the Falklands is a place that wants to take you over. So you probably, I don't know if you necessarily go through there. But in the Exordium series, so we're going to do the read along. In the Exordium series, the Rifters, who are some of the primary antagonists in the series, they have destroyers that were surplused, and they were surplused and turned into freighters. And you might look at this and go like, how on earth could a destroyer be turned into an economical freighter? And the answer is that the ships in this universe are relatively big. A destroyer is armed as its primary weapon with something called the skip missile. The skip missile tube is 1 kilometer long. You can, once you pull the skip missile machinery out, you can fit an awful lot of cargo in a 1 kilometer long cargo hold. I don't know how wide it is. Dave and Sher would have never defined exactly how wide it is, but the Panarchic Navy at one point got rid of all their Alpha class destroyers and replaced them with the Manta class destroyers, and they demilitarized them. And so a lot of these ships went off and spent 100 years as freighters, and then they started getting bought up by people that wanted to remilitarize them. And basically the Rifters are the equivalent of pirates. There's an area within the Panarchy known as the Rift that the deal is the Panarchy sort of stays away from the Rift, and anything goes in the Rift. And it's a very specific decision to do that, because all societies need a place where that if you don't want to be part of the society, you can go someplace. And if you don't have a place where you can go do that, those people have a tendency to become criminals within the society and cause problems within the society. So it's in the Panarchy's best interest to create, to allow it to be created an area where all the people that aren't interested in following all the rules can make their own rules. Yeah. Some of those people decided they wanted warships, and that turned out to be problematic over the course of the books. Yeah. I'm trying to think of what other science fiction,
subsidy wise, or
just in general, whether there's any that draw. I don't think we've heard anything about that in Babylon 5.
No,
to the best of my knowledge. I don't recall anything about that in say Space Above and Beyond. I don't know if there's anything like that in Star Wars, but I don't do Star Wars.
Yeah.
I watch Star Wars movies. I don't try to analyze Star Wars, because that way madness lies.
We do see it when we get to owner's share in the Solar Clipper series. He talks about, so they have to teach Ishmael, our main point of view character, about the economics of owning a shipping company.
Yes. And I do recall there's something in there that said, like, if you can get a government subsidy, that's great.
Yeah. It's
because you can always you've always got that sort of cushion underneath you.
Yeah. And, they want more ships. They want to keep the industry vibrant with multiple companies. So, yeah. Let's see. So operational construction, tax incentives.
So Patrick Ross said, "What do you mean there's no civilian use for a 3-inch gun mount?" It's okay. So that's true, but one of the things when the pre-World War I, there was this big belief in something called the auxiliary cruiser. It kept showing up in Navy treaties and stuff like that because there was this belief that you could just mount a gun on an ocean liner, and because ocean liners emphasize speed, that this gave you something that you could use as a commerce raider, right? It's not really designed to go up against warships, but it could run down enemy commerce and shoot them with the gun. Now, I'm just going to mount a gun on my ocean liner. Well, no, that doesn't quite work like that. But the Royal Navy did subsidize. I guess I technically don't know if it was the Royal Navy that did it, but some part of the British government would subsidize ship designs so that they had an area that was stressed, had the proper framing, etc., so you could mount a gun there and fire the gun without screwing up your ship. And if you've read Elizabeth Moon's Trading in Danger series, and I can't remember what the name of the main character is, but it's Vada's War. Vada's War. Yeah. If you've read the Vada's War series, you may recall that there is a privateer in that is a civilian ship that I'm going to give you a minor spoiler for Vada's War. It's a civilian ship, and they mounted a BFG on it. And at one point, they go into the yard to have some engineering work done, and the engineers come and say, "I got good news and bad news. The good news is you're not going to have to pay for the thing that you wanted fixed because we ain't going to fix it. Because the bad news is that your ship's about to snap in half because you mounted this BFG onto a ship that was not designed to have a BFG mounted there, and the recoil has been stress fracturing the spine of your ship, and you're about done. Like the next shot could destroy your ship." Which was, if I remember correctly, really problematic because this was one of the high-performing ships of the fleet, and this was a non-trivial thing and an important part of the war. Losing that ship was a big deal. And I should add that to the list of things to do a read-along with because I love that series.
Yeah, I have to I haven't read it or listened to it in years.
Yeah, I did it not right when it first came out, but I may have been living in Newport when I did that series. If not, I think I was living in Charlottesville early in my time at Charlottesville, which means it was only 10 plus years ago. So I need to redo it. And I haven't done the sequel series at all.
Yeah, I did it within a few years of it coming out.
I really like Elizabeth Moon's stuff. She's really good, and she understands. She's a former Marine, and she understands a few things like, for instance, ships in her universes have a tendency to need tugs to get in and out of port. And if you're going to use tugs, you need to have markings on your ship that tell the tug where to push and where not to push. Where the connection point is and where you, under no circumstances, should you do anything here.
Yeah. Something we see on real ships.
You see that on real ships all the time. You'll look on the side of the ship and there's basically like an arrow and a sign that says push here. And what that means is that there's framing in that part of the ship so that if a tug comes and pushes on it, it can do that without damaging the ship. Because any tug that's got enough oomph to actually move your ship probably has enough oomph to actually damage your ship if they do it wrong.
And this is
oomph is the technical term, by the way.
And this has a lot to do with what they call reduced scantlings on a commercial ship.
Okay.
They downsize the size of the steel in certain places.
Makes your ship lighter.
Yep. Cheaper.
So steel is relatively cheap as these things go, but do not underestimate the cheapskateness of any accountant when you're trying to build something like this. But it decreases the weight of the ship also, which makes it, use less fuel as it's going through the water and stuff like that. And incidentally, this is why when people say, well, why don't we just have the foreign shipyards, if we were going to build the Constellation frigate was based upon an Italian design, why don't we just have the Italian shipyard build it? Well, the answer is all of the things like scantling size and framing and all that other stuff is highly defined, highly controlled by various governing bodies, and the US Navy standard is different than the US civilian standard, and it's certainly different than anybody else's Navy standard. And so, like, you go on board a Japanese ship, from what I'm told, it looks much more like you're on a commercial ship in terms of like what the framing is, et cetera, than it looks like a US Navy warship.
Which saves you money.
Saves you money.
You can use a lot of the same people, a lot more of the same people, I should say.
Some of this requires specialized skill sets and welding techniques and things like that.
Yeah, on the U.S. side, if you're doing commercial, you can subsidize, and it's somewhat self-paying a commercial ship. And we need to build a destroyer, and we're going to use commercial standards or just a little bit more. And you were building a tanker. Now you're going to build a destroyer. Well, guess what? It's the same thickness of steel as the tanker, but it's a tenth the size. So it actually holds up against pounding and such.
Yeah.
And heavy weather and such. So
yeah, there's a lot of issues like that. I mean, some of them I've talked about before. Like Chris Carlson and I have had this conversation multiple times. Chris would point out that against a modern anti-ship cruise missile or modern anti-ship missile, that the U.S. Navy ship is going to take at least mission kill damage, and a civilian commercial standard type warship would take at least mission kill damage. Might very well sink in both cases. And that it's like, the difference between taking 150% of your rated damage capability and taking 300% of your rated damage capability is pretty trivial, because both of those numbers are greater than 100 and you're going down. My response to that is the worst case scenario. That's a high-end event. There are certainly a lot of things that are less extroverted than getting hit by a cruise missile, anti-ship missile, that you're not as likely to die. Yeah. And so maybe you want to do that. But the other piece of that, there was another point I was going to make about that. And now I've totally lost lock on it.
If you have a less severe event.
Yeah, no, but there was something else I was going to say.
Like you bump up against it. Well, no, it doesn't work.
I was going to say, I remember what it was. One of the things about the difference between commercial ships and warships is commercial ships will frequently avoid things that the Navy decides it's just going to sail through. Right? Now, does the Navy intentionally sail through hurricanes? No. The Navy goes around. Other ships go around. You don't want to be in a hurricane if you can avoid it. That having been said, the definition of can you avoid it is not the same for both, right? Yeah. The U.S. Navy will do stuff, will go into areas, do stuff that commercial ships will avoid. And so when you talk about hull pounding, right, that in some ways actually starships, I can see starships lasting a lot longer than a Navy ship does, because you're not constantly, first of all, hammering on the hull, and second of all, trying to twist the ship, right? forces are not put equally on the ship. And so like if you end up with a situation where each end of the ship is on a wave and the end part is in the middle part is not as well supported, you're flexing the spine of the ship, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And if you don't think that's a big deal, try to put your shoulders on your couch and your feet on your ottoman and just plank across the empty space and tell me that it's not a big deal.
Yeah. I was on one class of ship and we went down to look at the sewage plant because it gave us an alarm, and walked out and was like, what's that? Holy crap. About a 6 foot long, half-inch wide crack in one of the structural bulkheads.
That's not supposed to be there.
Correct. Yeah.
6 foot long, half-inch wide.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you do when that happens?
They come in, they drill stop it, and they weld it up, and then they figure out what happened.
Okay, so drill stop. You put a hole at the end of the crack so the crack can't spread any further.
Yeah.
And so you do that on either end.
Yeah.
And then you
weld. You just weld it where it is.
You have to put in filler material.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so you put in filler. It's not like you're pulling it back together. No. You're putting filler material in. And then, okay, there's some great videos. I think it's by Mike Brady and Ocean Liner Designs. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah, I love that channel.
Yeah.
I love that channel. And he does some stuff about, there's an entire series he's done on just like people doing stupid things in ship design and things. And there was a class, I don't think it was the Liberty ships. Was it the Liberty ships that would just break in half?
Yes. Yes. Bad steel.
They had bad steel. They put stress. And in some cases, they weren't even at sea. They were like pier side. And there would just be this loud crack and the ship would just fall apart.
Yeah. I'll try and show you.
Hoping the ship that we go on tomorrow doesn't do that. But
I think I know.
If it's lasted this long, it's probably not going to do that.
Yeah. I think when we get on board, at least from the pier, you can see the reinforcement band.
Oh yeah, because they figured out like this is the place where if it's going to break here because of where the stresses are. So like let's put a Band-Aid on that. Let's reinforce that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day, you just sort of like built shit and saw if it worked or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully you got your calculations good enough, and as long as you kept making them that way, that's when you found out there was a problem. Otherwise, it's like, well, okay, yeah, we made 3 ships of this type, and 5 years later they all have sunk, but there's not enough of a pattern there to say, oh, this is what we could have done better.
Yeah, especially in the middle of wartime, if they're out sailing in the middle of a convoy, you don't necessarily know. Sternbach has an example that actually it's technically not Sternbach because he did the artwork for this spaceflight chronology, but he didn't write the text. But there is a specific thing there where Starfleet in that no longer canon, but canon when it came out background, where Starfleet had designed a ship that had 3 warp nacelles, and because they expected, it's going to be 50% better because we added 50% more engines, and it was a total and complete dog. And the short version was they learned an awful lot about warp dynamics that they didn't previously understand, because they didn't understand that the 3rd engine created an interference pattern. There was a weird harmonic that they didn't realize that doesn't happen with 2 but does happen with 3. That I think is actually kind of interesting because that's not consistent with where Sternbach later took things. where the navigational deflector is in itself a third warp source, right? It also is distorting space-time. And so, in fact, the USS Tritium, this 3 nacelle ship, doesn't seem to have a navigational deflector in it. And so, but it's an interesting sort of background thing. But I kind of look at that and go like, really, that's the first time they tried 3 that late? Not even a test ship. They went right to building a full-scale prototype. That didn't strike me as making a whole lot of sense. Yeah. Let's see. Trying to think. So we've been at this for about 80 minutes, so it's probably time for us to think about wrapping it up. And so if anybody has, I'm looking at this to see if there's any questions. Randall made the comment that thinks the Brown was at the 50th anniversary for Normandy. That I
can't remember. One of the two was unable to cross the Atlantic.
It would make more sense that it would be the Brown because the Jeremiah O'Brien is on the West Coast. Yeah. So if you were going to send one to
they tried to send 2.
They tried to send them both?
Yeah. And one of them was unable to make it. Mechanical breakdowns, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's an old ship.
It was old then.
It's old, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 50. John W. Brown was commissioned is the wrong word. Launched in 43, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And so, 50th anniversary of Normandy, she would have been a little over 50 years old.
Yeah. Now it's been another 30 years almost since then.
Yeah. I mean, we're coming up on we're past the 80th anniversary of Normandy.
Okay.
Right? 44 to 2024 would have been 80 years, right?
No, I'm thinking 50 and 30 because I took my daughter on board as a baby.
That's why.
Yeah. She wouldn't remember any of it.
I worked for a guy who was at Woodstock, and I looked at him. He was an Army colonel, and I looked at him and said, "How old were you, Mark?" And he said, "I was 9 months old." And I said, "What did you think of Woodstock?" I think I asked him, "What's your fondest memory of Woodstock?"
Yeah. So, I got on board when one of them was in Boston. I can't remember which one.
How long has O'Brien been on the West Coast? Has she moved around a lot?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So, I would think it would be Brown that you were on board then.
Maybe. I can't remember.
So,
yeah. I think the Browns moved a lot. She was originally in New York. She was a school ship.
Okay.
For New York City high school.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah. You went to school on the ship, and you learned to fix things.
A lot of things to fix.
Yeah, and learn to run a ship and such. So it was.
It's really amazing that those ships are that there's even 2 left.
Yeah.
Because they weren't intended to be. Ships wear out and get decommissioned. How many 80-year-old ships do we have around? And these were ships that were designed to be cranked out for the war. Like you said, if you completed one voyage, they considered, you got your money's worth, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You completed one voyage, there's a technical term involving, sunk costs or whatever. So after one trip, you're fully amortized. You can just decommission it.
Yeah.
And so they really didn't expect any of those things to last. But some of the things that they built as across all different forces, all countries that they built as temporary, like the Colossus class light aircraft carriers. The Brits built those as disposable ships, and there were ships in that class in service until the 90s in Brazilian service, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
The Australians had one, and it was the last Royal Australian Navy aircraft carrier. And its final master,
Yep.
You know the story, right?
Oh, yes.
The final master was?
A. Bertram Chandler.
A. Bertram Chandler, the author of the John Grimes series, because the ship had not yet been towed away to the breakers, and maritime law said that it needed to have a master on board. And so he got hired to basically, as near as I can tell, walk around the ship and make sure it wasn't sinking.
Yeah.
Poke his head in some spaces, make sure it wasn't sinking, and then go back to his stateroom and work on his novel.
Yeah, you got to have somebody that can sign, that's got the authority to sign off on things and such.
So I need to see if he ever wrote like an autobiography or something, because I'd love to know, like was he the only guy on that ship?
I don't know.
I mean, did they have they probably weren't maintaining a full watch, but you'd think that maybe they might have an engineer on board. Like if the lights went out, somebody'd have to fix them, right?
Yeah.
Was he cooking his own meals?
I don't know.
Was he going off this? No, I know you don't know, but I mean, these are the questions that I have.
Yeah. Because
I know that when we did Martin, right? Like when we did Martin, I asked you how many people are on board right now.
Right.
And I think you said that you thought that there were probably 3 people on board, and we did not run into another person in the 90 minutes that we were on board.
Yeah.
We didn't run into anybody else. So but there was probably 3 people on board. And I remember that the cook had made a meal, and there were plates of food with cellophane wrap over them sitting on the counter, waiting for the people on board the ship to come and grab their food and eat their dinner.
Yeah.
So I would think that if you were living on board the ship, it would be a real pain in the ass 3 times a day to have to hoof over to someplace pierside to get food.
MARAD does it all the time. MARAD will tie 2 ships up right next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll have 1 steward on each ship, or a steward and a cook. And they'll cook meals on 1 ship for a month. And then they'll move over to the other ship and cook meals and serve over there.
But all you have to do is go to another ship that's tied up right next to you, right?
Yes.
So it's not like you have to how many places in a port, inside the port, are there to go get breakfast? It's got to be some, but
most of the places I've been, 0. It's only the Navy bases that will have something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that if you're A. Bertram Chandler, you probably
Now he probably went to
maybe he went down to the galley and cooked his own food.
Well, there's that. The other possibility is if he doesn't have to have somebody on the ship all the time, physically on the ship, he just goes there for 8 hours a day, walks around, checks a few things, deals with any paperwork, then writes, and has breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the O Club or the officers' mess or whatever,
Yeah, if they were in a Navy port, he might have been just going to the O Club.
Yeah.
I think he lived on the ship. I think I remember that he lived on the ship.
Okay, he still may have gone, to a ship next door.
Still, that's true. There might have been something else at the.
Yeah. All it takes is one other ship next door. And that's where he's got to go eat.
Yeah, that's just that. There's all sorts of interesting science fiction implications of this being the only guy on the ship and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that depends. It's going to depend a lot on your assumptions. Why do you have to have a guy on the ship? Well, if it's just to meet the legal requirements of having a responsible person, it's got to be a senior officer, a master, or chief engineer. But they don't actually necessarily have to be there. all the time, not 24/7. So, yeah.
I like the model, by the way, of the idea that the officers are humans and the ship's crew per se is the ship's AI. Right? You sort of see that in Andromeda,
Yeah.
where effectively you've got a crew of one. You've got like a handful of officers in one crew. And it was kind of always the case that you had a bunch of officers in one crew. The closest thing I've seen with that recently is Anne Lecky's Ancillary Justice series, where all of the crew are basically repurposed, conquered humans that are being run by the ship's AI, that are being instantiated by the ship's AI. And you've got human officers that are actually themselves, and then all the crew used to be people, but they're not really people anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. There's one book I was reading. Yeah, the ship has an AI, and it's like the second officer all the time. That's their job, is they're the second officer. So you go from third officer to first officer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a general rule, I've been frequently disappointed with a lot of the AI interacting with the ship's crew type stuff, because frequently the AI is, even though I like the show and even though I like the approach, Rami and Andromeda never really came across as being anything other than a human, right? I did always find it interesting whenever they would have the Council of War, and it's like, well, what do you want to do? I'm a warship. I want to fight.
Yeah.
I always thought that was kind of entertaining. But I don't know anybody who's done a really good job of like making the AI think differently. The one exception to that is there's a couple of novels that I've written that are drafts. They haven't been picked up for publication yet. Where in one of them, it's very clear that the humans have to try to figure out how AIs work, and as AIs mature, sort of as they go from sort of their initial creation, sort of help them become mature AIs. And meanwhile, the AIs don't have the intuition that humans do, and so they're not real good about predicting what humans are going to do. And so they try to figure out how humans work by hardcore statistical analysis. And so they're constantly exchanging information about like, well, what are the humans around you doing? And so they're constantly trading data back and forth about how humans work so that they can do a better job of predicting us, which sounds really cool and really creepy at the same time.
Yeah. Surveillance state.
Yeah. So, all right. I don't think I've got anything else that's worth saying at this point. How about you? Do you got anything? Any parting words, etc.?
No, we'll have tour info.
Okay.
Next week or 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now, yes, 3 weeks.
3 weeks, whenever the next show is, whenever our schedules sync up and we can do a show. My intention is to do one show on the Savannah, one show and the science fiction implications thereof, one show on the Brown and the science fiction implications thereof. And so we'll do those things, and then I'll do a show on Wonderfest. Maybe have Wright on if he's available. He wasn't around tonight, so he hasn't given me any feedback on that. And we'll see what we can do with that. And in the meantime, oh, by the way, Lissa's just off tonight because she had to take somebody. She had to do car shuttling duties with somebody. So that's why we haven't seen Lissa tonight.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, thank you very much, Peter, for being on the show. Thank you very much to everybody who's out there. I am always in awe of the fact that you folks decide that you want to spend your Saturday night with me, and I very much appreciate that. And with that in mind, we'll see you soon. So thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah.